There are certain advantages in the order of speakers. The first speaker has very little time, or at least he gets the impression of getting little time. The middle one has is a better space, because the first speaker has already laid the groundwork, and on that we construct. We have a liberty to speak on. We don't have to go back to the history or the philosophy of these kind of loaded concepts as neoliberalism. And last speaker has a lot of freedom to speak because he can stretch time a bit, go beyond the set time. But anyway, what is neoliberalism and why it is, why it has become such a kind of bewitching political ideology or paradigm. I use the word bewitching because it is, it basically addresses the unbridled energy that the individual has. That's the foundational, that's the fundamental philosophical belief that basically drives this ideology. And therefore, you see, let me give a concrete example. These days, Elon Musk has been fomenting trouble all over the world. You might have seen that. He's instigating these, conservative far-right groups all over the world by using social media platforms and creating trouble, unrest, and you can see because of that, because of that problem, immigrants are facing a great deal of extremely uncertain times. So that guy is being hailed as a the guy who has huge creative passion, imagination. And how that imagination, how neoliberalism as a dangerous philosophy, you can see by what this guy has been doing. And we also have in this country his country cousins who also use social media platforms by creating, to create trouble. I just gave you this example because it's a, it is at the heart of this. There are these individuals who are believed to have this unfettered amount of energy, creativity, imagination. And that is why neoliberalism is a very, very big problem, political ideology, political paradigm, political problem that we are facing today. And it doesn't remain confined to politics. It goes beyond, it goes on, goes on talking about slum, it goes on talking against the urban poor, it goes on talking about, as Dr. Venkatraman rightly pointed out, against social justice, because it is inherently against these social collectivities. It basically kills what I would like to talk social hope. So it is all about individual who is at the center of this, quote unquote pernicious ideology. I mean, it is pernicious to a greater extent. It is also seriously basically enabling political ideologies to basically quote unquote problematize certain political rights or political privileges that the state granted to certain collectivities. For example, caste is one of them. We had caste discrimination. We have discriminations of various kinds. And the liberal or the welfare state, Nehruvian welfarism basically, of course, it also had certain big individuals who were running industries in the country. But then the state had a great deal of control. State exercised a great deal of control over these individuals. And then as a result, we had a kind of welfarist state which basically addressed, which also gave freedom to individuals. I mean, capitalists, for example, socialist capitalism or something. And at the same time, it also addressed the kind of problems that it had. Caste was continues to be a problem, but because of this, neoliberalization, caste is no longer a problem that needs to be addressed. So it is bewitching ideology because it basically gives a lot of freedom to individuals to explore what they believe is sacrosanct. And as a result, political ideologies also tend to exploit, misuse these kinds of projects. floated by, these kind of individuals. State basically is not out of the picture here. State, as Dr. Venkataraman also pointed out, state is very much in its place, but the kind of control that it is supposed to exercise, restraining control, that restraining control is, there is the space for the state itself is shrinking, because state claims that it doesn't have resources to address everyone's problems. And as a result, you bring in private capital. And this private capital is basically the problem. Now, Indian state, let us talk about the Indian state briefly. Indian state talks about secularism. Indian state also talks about addressing social discrimination embedded in caste, gendered practices. But at the same time, it also claims that it doesn't have resources to fund institutions of various kinds. Let me now give the example of higher education. Education itself has become a huge commodity. There are private institutions that basically cater to the needs of those who have huge amount of money. So you have therefore mushrooming every now and then private institutions. On the periphery of Delhi, these institutions have huge amount of spaces because they have money. Now, who gets to go and who gets to learn from these, these institutions? Those who have money. We also have a certain number of people who have got huge amount of money, so they would not like to come to institutions that are run by the government, because they would want to have education of different kinds. Then health industry is another area which has basically succumbed to the prestations of neoliberalism. There are hospitals, privately run hospitals. They more look like 5-star hotels. But they did not come to the rescue of by citizens, even private citizens, for example, during COVID times. You must have seen the kind of horror that we saw. The hospitals or the medical institutions that came to our help were government institutions. Okay, but then state is not willing to invest into these institutions, how they can be made robust. On the contrary, you encourage private capital and then they enter into various kinds of sectors. We spoke about 2 sectors, health and education. Now, there are spaces where the state is also encouraging the private capital to enter. While teaching my students during farmer struggle, I had expressed this kind of fear, not a possibility, that after the farmers struggle, after the farmers, the Indian state is going to go after slum dwellers. And that is what exactly is now unfolding. Slums are going to be the next victims of this obsession with private capital. You might have heard or read about Dharavi slum. Dharavi is now gone to Adani. Why? Because the state believes that it would like to eradicate poverty, and poverty is only seen in slums. It doesn't really take into account whether these people have been staying there for a very, very more than 100 years, in some places 50, 60, certainly more than 50, 60 years. Now these people created these spaces. Now the state believes that it would give them better housing. But it is not willing to talk to those people. It is not willing to talk to slum dwellers. It, on the contrary, brings in the development model from the above. Because what comes from the above, what is parachuted, has a lot of money, a lot of capital. The state also can create capital by allowing those slum dwellers to construct houses for them. But the state is not willing to them because it is also interested in what David Harvey calls creative destruction. I mean, it calls creative destruction because it is there is a lot of ambiguity. Creativity comes from destruction, and here you destroy the lives of those slum dwellers by giving them better housing, quote unquote. But that better housing is also going to empty half of the slum. In slums, there are people, there are families, more than 2 families, sometimes 3 families live in slums, most of the slum houses. Dharavi is a very special place because it is basically a very entrepreneurial slum. There are shops, there are several units of what we call informal sector industry. That's a very vibrant slum, and it also contributes huge revenues to the state. But then the state, in cahoots with the private capital, is more interested in grabbing that place. Most of the slums, whichever part of the country, old slums especially, they are in the center of the city, not on the periphery, because city is spread, and as city is spread, earlier these used to be the center where the slums are standing today. A lot of slums from Delhi have been removed and thrown out in the name of resettlement. Bhavana is one of the places where you see these resettlement colonies, and they are and state didn't really think about whether these people are overnight going to lose their sources of earning income. So that is not the state's interest, that is not the state's concern. The state believes that it is giving them housing, it is giving them spaces to stay, better housing, because slums are believed to be unhygienic entities. That's not really true. Gone are the days where slums are unhygienic. There are some parts of the slum, of course, because the poor and the marginalized people, when they migrate to cities, they basically come and seek accommodation in slums. So that is why, and that is why slums population goes on increasing. Because small towns are not, there is no employment. Agricultural sector is not profitable anymore. There is rampant migration from our villages and small cities to big cities and big towns, because you are not investing your capital into developing small cities and small towns. That is why the influx of people comes into the cities, because that's where the capital also burgeons. So you need to have a kind of sensible political leadership to address these issues. But unfortunately, we have the political leadership that has succumbed to the pressure of the private capital, this bewitching ideology of neoliberalism. So why? Because it believes that the individuals are creative, they are imaginative individuals, they have a lot of agency, and as a result of their creative imagination, this unfettered energy that they have, they help society evolve or develop and create economic profitability. So what is at the center of this whole argument is that economic profitability. Political class should devise, with the help of intellectuals, economic policies. But in the neoliberal era, it is the other way around. It is, individuals who have money, who have capital, they run the politics. And politicians become, handmaiden of their politics. So that's the reality. So unless and until we secure our state that doesn't really succumb to the pressures of private individuals, a future is going to be bleak. So therefore, we have to not only think about securing or keeping our political institutions safe, but we also have sensible leaders who can exercise great deal of control over the kind of economic policies that we adopt. During Manmohan Singh's regime or time in early 90s, that's where the neoliberalism or the privatization of Indian institutions emerged quite aggressively. But Manmohan Singh would always talk about having humans face. We would basically develop the country, will also bring in private capital, we will also encourage private individuals. Otherwise, what happens is private capital will fly out of the country. So you have to also address that issue. But then you don't have to, basically, you have to also secure the interest of those who have been marginalized for centuries. So unless and until you have that political doctrine in your political program, then it becomes free for everyone. Then all we have these individuals who have this appetite for exploiting resources. And exploiting resources always comes at the cost of individuals. We are not a Western society. In our society, we have collectivities, and these collectivities nowadays, since 2014, are being basically massively instigated. Certain sections are being politically propped up because, in the name of religion. If you use religion as a political card, then you don't really care about providing people employment, quality education. So then you use religion. Religion, and only certain entities are being allowed to express their religious imaginations. You see, you have this huge amount of Babas who are believed to be, finding solutions to our problems. Problems are economic in nature, but then we use all these very, very fascinating ideas, spiritualism, and this is spreading everywhere. So the state is not willing to address these issues which are social and economic in nature, but then state is basically encouraging these kind of tendencies that are basically, end up people not thinking positively. Basically, these kind of practices, these kind of projects are not letting us think creatively. Only those individuals who have capacity, monetary basically, who are basically able to create economic resources, they are believed. But these individuals are not very fine individuals who are not really creative enough. Most of these people looted our public sector banks and they fled the country. A lot of them. Our public sector banks are basically bailing these people out. Even those who have remained in the country, they have sought huge amount of money from public sector banks. And a lot of the money that they borrowed has been waived off. So, in the name of neoliberalism, our political class is basically, destroying the institutions that have been laboriously built by our founding fathers. Even political institutions, for example, secular uncertainty. Now, the local people, same can be, parallels from that argument can be drawn to analyze Indian situation. Certain sections of people are being targeted. And this imagination, which looks politically against, very bewitching, this collective that everyone is Hindu in this country. Hindu is an abstract idea, notion, just like, neoliberalism. We have castes. What we have concrete are castes. And this extremely interesting political idea that everyone belongs to one religion is very dangerous. But the political belief behind is that all of us are equal. But India is a very diverse country. But then at the same time, when you try to bring everyone under the umbrella of Hindu, then you would believe that all of us are Hindu and we don't believe in caste. But that's the political program that is being massively implemented, that everyone is Hindu. And those who do not really belong to Hinduism, then obviously either they are outsiders or then they have to basically mend their ways and become what Hindus expect. Communities are being boycotted. Why? Because there are not enough resources. And those who are claiming for resources, those who are expecting jobs, those who are expecting resources of different kinds from the state is not willing to give them. Otherwise, it would not play the religious card. So that is the dangerous situation that we are seeing. Neoliberalism as a political ideology and communalism, these are two different things apparently. But they are not, they feed into each other. That's the danger that we are seeing today. You should not demand jobs, you should not demand quality education, you should not demand quality health, because the state is not really investing into these projects. Why? Because it is encouraging private capital to come in. And private capital is happy to exploit these resources because it is only interested in multiplying its interest. That is at the heart of capitalism. It accumulates, it just goes on accumulating because it has to create, it has to corner rather than creating surplus value. So this human greed, this individual greed is basically making everyone suffer. And this political ideology, basically neoliberalism, justifies this individual greed. So to what extent you should control your desire to accumulate? It's an individual question. So, and this ideology gives basically unfettered access to these resources, and it just goes on exploiting anything. Nature becomes one of the biggest hits, one of the biggest casualties. Human beings, basically, we are dependent on nature. Our water bodies are basically being polluted by, industrial effluent. Rivers are being emptied out of sand, because middle class, this increasingly rising middle class, would want to have palatial places, houses. So there is no water in the river beds, because the water needs to, the sand basically plays a very important role in controlling water. So water bodies exist because of sand. But these rivers are being emptied of sand. It's a very precious natural resource. Water, for example. So you talk about, increasing agricultural yield, but there is no water. And as a result, people are basically, small farmers are small farmers are migrating, and then cities are getting flooded with migrants. And then, there is no space, and wherever there are spaces, they are being given to private entities. Slums, as I said, a lot of slums are being given on the platter to private entities to develop. And they are more interested not in resettling people or redeveloping the slums, but they are interested in the land that is in billions. If I were to give, I'll just quickly take a minute and finish my talk. Dharavi is now between two Bombays. The posh Bombay, the western, the South Bombay ends where Dharavi begins, and Dharavi ends where all these suburbs start. So the land is between these two Bombays. So it is, and in the neighborhood of all these airports, as well as these huge multinational corporations. That is why that land is being given to Adani, and half of Dharavi is going to be emptied. There are various claims of the people which are not going to be taken into account by the state. So this is the problem, and the kind of and Dharavi is also changed. There are a lot of these multi-storied buildings have come up. Middle classization of Dharavi is also going to go against the very existence of Dharavi, because middle class would want to have better housing, better living conditions. So those people who remain confined to these little spaces, slums, they are going to be driven out. And I don't think they are going to, I only hope that they create, or they pose a kind of huge political resistance that the farmers from North India posed, the kind of political challenges to the regimes that be. So neoliberalism is entering every walk of our life, all institutions. Not only political institutions have succumbed to the bewitching ideology of neoliberalism, but the way we basically structure our cities. So it's a huge challenge before us. Of course, there are very few islands where we resist. JNU is one of them. But we have to take this kind of politics beyond the confines of JNU if we want to really fight the sinister political ideology called neoliberalism. I think with this I'll stop. Thank you.